This is Bobby Albert with the podcast of Lead to Grow, and I have a co-host here of Zach Lewis, and we have a good friend of mine, Bill Peel, as a guest today. He's the Executive Director of the Center of Faith and Work at LeTourneau University. And Bill, it's such a pleasure to have you on this show today. So, hey, Bill, I've known you for a while now, and of course you and I have been in the car over driving for several hours together. And tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get to be this? Because you've lived a pretty colorful life, and so how did you get to being heading up the Center of Faith and Work?
Bobby, colorful can mean a lot of different things.
I know. It just came out. It just came out that way. So,
well, hey, it's a pleasure to be with you. It's always fun to be with you and spend time with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Well, I was actually raised in a pastor's home, interestingly enough, and decided that I was supposed to go work in churches. This was actually before I actually trusted Christ as my Savior, which is interesting. But I'm not sure I would recommend that path at all. But I went to university and then to seminary and ended up at a church in Fort Worth where there was a title attorney in his mid-50s, very successful businessman, who was an elder in the church. And he sat me down one day, and Bill Garrison told me, he says, "Peel, you realize that God's heroes don't stand behind pulpits, don't you?" Now, for a guy that had just completed 120 graduate hours of theology, that was a pretty big shock. And he obviously believed in pastors and training pastors. He was on the trustee board of this, seminary that I graduated from. And but what he was trying to tell me is that my job, when people gathered on Sunday morning, was to prepare people for living out their faith in the next part of their life, Monday through Saturday.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the beginning. That kind of arrested the direction that I think I would have gone in and began to help me understand that as far as God's concerned, he sees all 7 days a week the very same thing. There's not Sunday and then the other 6 days.
Yes.
God wants all of that, and he claims the workplace as his own. And so 10 years later, I found myself actually leaving a church to work full-time with people in the workplace and helping them see what the Bible actually taught about that. And that's how I got started in this. That was 30 years ago, actually.
Wow.
So, and it was not cool to do that then. Let me tell you what.
I bet it wasn't.
There's a lot more. In fact, there's a ton going on in this area right now. There are pastors, there are seminary leaders, there are business leaders like yourself, all thinking and talking a lot about what it means to live their faith out 7 days a week, especially in the workplace. And today, and we live in a very exciting time as far as that's concerned right now.
Well, that's very encouraging. So how did you end up at LeTourneau University and heading this up?
Well, we moved back here to Dallas in 2000, and I worked at a church for a while and then went back out on my own doing what I do in the workplace, discipling people there and helping them see what faith has to do with work, and was working with my church, Park Cities Presbyterian, and we did several events there for workplace people. And the president of LeTourneau showed up there one day, and I met him, and probably about a year later, they asked me to found their Center for Faith and Work. And I knew about LeTourneau before, but I didn't really know the history of what this university was. LeTourneau was the only university founded by a businessman. Every other university is founded by, a group of pastors or denomination or whatever. But LeTourneau was actually founded by this fellow, R.G. LeTourneau, who was probably the best-known Christian businessman in America in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And he actually had the largest religious charitable organization in the world, the LeTourneau Foundation. He made the giant earth-moving machines that built the highway infrastructure of America, these big dirt-moving machines, and that helped win World War II. 70% of the earth-moving machines that the Seabees and the Corps of Engineers used in World War II were R.G. LeTourneau's machines. And he, right after the war, he was looking for to open a new factory that was close to a source of steel. Since shipping steel is kind of expensive, he said, let's find a place that makes it, and then we'll build these big machines next door. And so he ended up in Longview, Texas, and right across the street was an old Army barracks that had been just decommissioned, and they actually acquired that and started LeTourneau Technical Institute. Their first engineering students were GIs coming right out of World War II, and they were training these young men to be engineers. And engineering really still dominates, the culture at LeTourneau. It is a tech school. It's a STEM-oriented university, although we've got a lot of all the other soft things that really should go along with that as well. But I've been working there now for 7 years, and it's been an incredible experience because this idea that God is really interested in work and wants us to work for Him 7 days a week in our workplace. And the actual work itself of making dirt-moving machines or engineering or building highways or teaching a fourth grade class or being a physician or a healthcare provider in some way. God really cares about all that stuff, and that's part of the DNA of the university. And so that's what I've been championing that and championing the university for the last 7 years. Well,
I know you've been doing a wonderful job. I'm just real impressed with what you've accomplished in 7 years there. And LeTourneau, it's not that well known as a university, but just hearing you talk before, the engineers there are highly sought after. Is that?
Well, that's really true. We are one of the magazines. I can't remember which one it is. Does a thing on return on investment, and we're the second. We have the best ranking of of all the universities on return on investment, and that's largely because of our engineering students. But the only university in Texas has a better ROI as a private university than LeTourneau is Rice University.
Wow!
And when you lump all of them in there, okay, A&M is just barely ahead of us, but we actually have engineers that can go to work the very first day. And so our engineering graduates are highly valued because they don't have to be retrained. They're not sitting in a class of 500, 150 kids learning engineering principles. They're actually getting to know their professors, spending time with them, and all the education is very, very hands-on.
I've spoken at your chapel over there in Longview, and has that been going on since the school started? What the university there is?
Actually, the chapel thing started way before the university.
Huh.
Mr. LeTourneau was one of the first industrialists to actually bring chaplains into his workplace and have chapel meetings actually in his factories, and
Wow.
that was just a natural thing that he continued to do. It is obviously a very regular thing among Christian universities, but that was just part of the way he did business, and it was one of the ways he was going to do university too.
Yeah, well, boy, he really was way ahead of his time.
He was in so many ways. He really was. When he was a young man, before he actually started making these giant earth-moving machines full-time, he was in the dirt-moving business, and he really loved it. But he had two sisters that became missionaries in China right after one of the bloodiest, revolts, in Chinese history when they tried to throw out all the missionaries. And so he got to feeling pretty guilty about, whether his life really counted for God or not. And one night he said, okay, God, I'm all in. And he went to his pastor and he said, Pastor, I know that laymen can't serve God like a pastor or a missionary, but what does he want me to do? And he really thought he was going to end up on the mission field. But after they prayed together, his pastor told him something in some ways unusual, but it's very wise, and that is, Bob, God needs businessmen as much as he needs pastors and missionaries. And so
Wow.
Mr. LeTourneau said, all right, if that's what he wants me to be, I'll be his businessman.
Wow.
And that's actually, he became known as God's businessman in America after that.
Wow, what wisdom from a pastor like that,
Yeah.
that thought that. So he really liked dirt.
He did. He liked dirt, and he liked his machines that move the dirt.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a kid in all of us, right? So I know that my wife and I we know your wife Kathy, and if you could maybe take a little moment and share a little bit about her, because y'all really are a tag team.
Well, Kathy is, the all-star of the team for sure. I've written 7 books. She's written 21 and is actually working on her 22nd right now.
Wow!
So that tells you a lot. She's been on all of the morning shows in New York, done hundreds of television programs, been on Oprah Winfrey's show, and just is an incredible lady. And she wrote mainly, in the main part of her writing career was talking about family management. She actually looked at running a home as like legitimate work. Okay, this is it's kind of crazy to talk like that, but a lot of people don't think of the work that is done to run a home as a real business, but it's huge. And she grew up in a family where both parents worked, and when we got married, she was, as she says, domestically challenged. And so she tried to figure out how to run things, and she was kind of upset about that for a while. And then she realized, wait a minute, my parents taught me how to run an organization. And she said, the family is an organization. In fact, it's the most important organization. And she started looking at those principles that run a great organization. She applied them to the home, and it was a wonderful thing. So here's one of the principles that she came up with. So you have standard operating procedures in most businesses. You know what to do, and you don't have to think through and make decisions every time about every detail. So she got really, it was so painful for her to pick up the boys every day at school, because they'd come to the car and they'd be fighting over who was going to get in the front seat, and then they'd fight over the what music they were going to play.
Oh, boys don't do that, do they?
Well, we won't say it.
Yeah.
So she said, now wait a minute, we never used to argue at my mom's dress shop about who was going to clean up the dressing rooms, pick up the clothes, who was going to close, who was going to, get the bank, the money ready to take to the bank, and all that stuff. And she said, we had standard operating procedures to do that. And she said, boom, okay, John, you're the oldest, so you're going first. You're going to, this week, you get to sit in the front seat, okay? Joel, you're in the back seat. No arguments here, okay? And whoever's in the front seat gets to choose what the music is that we're going to play. It totally stopped the arguing and made it a semi-pleasant trip, from school home. And so just things like that, which are so simple, and yet, they're brilliant and have helped, millions of women, gain some sanity in how they operate their home and run the business of home.
Yeah, that's very wise advice. And I know once we finish here, you're going to be driving to Waco to visit. I know you may say you visit your two sons, but it's really the grandkids. But they have a business called Hole in the Roof. You mind sharing just a little bit?
Sure.
About that, where that name came from and those kind of things.
Well, there are 3 businesses down there that they have. There's LeTourneau University, which is my oldest son's company, and he does tons of graphic stuff for Baylor University and school logos and all that kind of thing. And then my second son has Hole in the Roof Marketing, and it's a marketing company. They do all kinds of logo design and put that on T-shirts and anything that'll sit still for them to be able to label. And it actually came, Joel started that business, and John started his business too when they were actually students. So Joel's big thing was customer service above and beyond expectation. That was kind of this really strong principle in his mind that he started his business with. And so he looked at Luke chapter 5 and the letting of the lowering of the paralytic down through the roof, and he said, now those guys understood customer service above and beyond expectation, because they took their friend and they would not take no for an answer. They figured out a way to get him in front of Jesus, and so that's Hole in the Roof Marketing.
Yeah, I tell you what, I love that, and I did work with your son Joel. In fact, you have a copy of my book, Principal Profits, Outward Success is the Inside Job, and there are several registered trademarks in there. And Hole in the Roof did the design
the graphic design.
Did the graphic designs. I was very pleased in working with them, and of course they also have some famous clients.
Yes.
You might not be able to share that, but.
Well, there's a big business in Waco that also has a television program, and if anybody owns any of those products, can I say the name? If anybody owns a fixer-upper hat or T-shirt or some kind of logo where it probably came out of
Hole in the
Roof and Sticker University.
Yeah, for the silos of Waco.
That's right.
Well, anyway. You and Kathy have done it really is pretty evident y'all have done a wonderful job in raising your sons, and I know you look forward to being with your grandkids tonight and playing with them. What is one accomplishment that would you say that in your life that because you've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot that you really. I know that there's something out there that you're really proud of, and do you mind sharing that? So,
well, beyond the fact that I have 3 sons that are great citizens and business people, living their faith out in their work, 7 days a week. That's every father's dream. If you look at my career or that, and it's probably there's a couple of things that stand out. Back in the mid-90s, I began to see there was a real need to help people in the workplace understand how to talk about God in their workplace with their colleagues without being obnoxious, without turning people off. And so a physician and I developed a course to teach people how to share their faith. Today, it's published in a book called Workplace Grace, and the principles of that have been taught all over the world, not by me, although we've done some of that, but by lots of other people who have carried this. So I think that anytime when you do something that has legs beyond yourself, that's a gift of God. Mm-hmm. And so we think that taking faith into the workplace makes the workplace a lot more wholesome, a lot more productive, actually, because it's easier to talk about character and the very things and values that matter most, that make a business work. And so anytime you're able to bring God into the workplace, not in a compulsory, not in a necessarily even overt way, but God makes a difference in work. Work needs God, and actually God, according to His plan, needs work. That's part of His plan and business, and that's part of His plan from the very beginning. I guess the other thing I would say is that I've just been thrilled to be able to make this contribution to the university and found the Center for Faith and Work for LeTourneau. We champion Mr. LeTourneau's legacy of bringing faith into his work and letting actually God be the senior partner of a business. We champion that on campus with students to make sure they get that when they leave, that they don't think somehow that faith belongs on Sunday, but then I'm on my own the rest of the week. That's just sucks life out of life, quite frankly. And then to take that message, and remind our alumni of that, and to the larger Christian community, and then to help churches begin to see what a powerful influence they can have in their people's lives when they begin to talk about a 7-day-a-week faith, a faith that informs the whole of their life. That has been such an incredible privilege to be part of Mr. LeTourneau's legacy, the legacy of LeTourneau University, and to help foster that whole idea of faith and work for the university and the world. It's been a tremendous, tremendous pleasure and gift of God to me.
I know you're a very humble person, and not too long ago you got your PhD, and I know you worked real hard for that. In fact, you used me on a guinea pig, I think, on a survey you used one, about this time a few years back. But could you tell us a little bit about about what you accomplished there?
Well, yeah. So I was, I used to tell people I'm the world's oldest doctoral student, but once you graduate, you're just an old doctor then. But my wife tells people I got my Medicare card and my doctorate the same year. But what I did my work in was basically a theology of business. And what does a business look like that's really that really glorifies God? And I identified several components that people need to think about. I had a guy several years ago, and I sat down and talked to him about his work, and he said, one day I'm going to stand before God, and He's going to ask me what I did with my family and my life and my money, and He's also going to ask me what I did with my business. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really true. I'd never thought of it quite like that. Well, if God's going to, ask you that question, it might be good to know what the criterion were that He's going to judge you by. And so I found 6 different instrumental values of business that God wants us to think about, as people in business. If you're any kind of leader, and whether you own the company or not, you can begin to think about these things and bring godly values into the workplace. And I'm not talking about beating people over the head with the Bible at all, but just the way we do our work and how we do our work, and what the motives are, what the core values are, what the vision of that enterprise is, can be something that is very glorifying to God.
I'm sure you get asked this, and this may be the reason why you and I were working on some things about is this legal? To bring faith in the workplace. Do you mind sharing a little bit about some of that some things on that? So.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot going on right now. There's a case with the Supreme Court right now about a cake baker who refused to create one of his, what he considered a work of art, for a kind of wedding that he did not support, that violated his conscience. And we were part of filing an amicus brief with the Supreme Court. The Center for Faith at Work at LeTourneau was part of filing an amicus brief in support of Jack Perkins in this case. And so we think that faith belongs in the workplace. In fact, you start taking faith out, and it really, there's a destructive factor that happens to people. People become more selfish, self-centered, and that just destroys a workplace culture when God comes in there. And there are nice people that aren't. Okay, look, there are nice people that aren't people of faith. In fact, sometimes they're better than we are. But faith in general has a real positive effect on the workplace, and so we think that's really important. And we've connected with Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, and created a booklet on this that people can actually download from our website, centerforfaithandwork.com, and that really outlines what a business can do and can't do as far as what's legal before God. And we have tremendous leeway there. And one of the things that I get told a lot is, actually, there's a real estate company that, can I say this? They actually are the leasing company for this building. They're New York. So
I'll allow it. I'm okay.
I'm trying to. So I'll just let's get. So actually, the leasing the commercial real estate company that leases the building we're in right now, the New York lawyers told the fellow that ran that office here, was the head of this office, you cannot ever have a Bible study, you can't pray, you can't ever talk about religion, in the workplace here. And that's actually illegal to do that, unless you're going to say you can't talk about Cowboys football, you can't talk about any other non-business subject. If you allow any non-business conversation, you have to allow faith conversation in the workplace. Those are our rights. Now, what is legal is not always wise, Bobby, and you know that.
Yes, yeah.
My friend at ADF, Doug Nupure, says, stupid for Jesus is still stupid. And that's really true. And so just because something's legal doesn't mean it's always wise and winsome. We need to be very careful about what we do with faith, because it can be divisive in our culture today. And what we teach people in this curriculum and book, Workplace Grace, is that you always want to win the right to be heard, and you begin that with doing good work first of all. If you want people to care about your faith, you better spend a lot of time taking care of your work and doing a good job.
Yeah, I love what everything you're mentioning there. I started in the spring of 1987. I declared that I wanted to see my work as a ministry that I went to each day and not a job. And it really changed my outlook on the workplace. But to be honest with you, at first, okay, I declared it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I started it was volunteer for people to attend a Bible study. I was teaching high school boys at that time. And I thought, this material could be used for adults. And so that's what I did. But I was surprised as how many employees attended, even though it's all volunteer. And the company, even though I sold the company in 2011, they still, every Thursday, still have a Bible study for the employees to attend. So I'm thrilled that they've, continued that legacy. But for many years I taught it, and until our business kept growing and I had to travel so much. And if I could maybe ask You've lived such a very successful life. Can you mind sharing maybe a failure that, something you'd like to change if you could? So I know you're kind of squirreling in your chair right now. So,
Well, yeah, that's never fun to talk about that side of it. But I've learned that talking about those things is helpful for me. It reminds me not to go back there again, and hopefully it helps other people. So I love my work, and I always have. And the problem is that I've loved my work at times more than I've loved Kathy and, quite frankly, God. Now, that sounds kind of odd coming from a pastor, a person that comes from that pastoral training and pastoral care and things like that. But it's really true. You can put your work in front of God all the time, and I think a lot of people deal with that. My assistant a few years ago, when we were meeting with the president of the university, outed me. She had counted up. I keep track on my calendar of what I do every day, and she'd added my hours up, and I was working 80 hours a week. And I'd started this thing, and I'd never worked for a university before, so I was going to make sure I busted my chops to make this thing a success. And that's actually been a negative pattern in my life, that if what I do ever fails, it's not because there hadn't been a lot of dust stirred up by my work. The first time God really confronted me with that was actually the year I started working on this Faith and Work project. I was actually traveling all over East Texas and leading groups. We had 10 different study groups of people in the workplace talking about trying to learn from the Bible what the Bible said about work and faith. And I traveled out of town for one group and got up, at the crack of dawn and left and drove back. And I fell asleep driving back at the end of of weeks of lack of sleep. And it was on a narrow logging road in East Texas, and there were hills. And a fellow came over the hill probably right as I fell asleep, and the timing was just so that I only sideswiped him. But it was a truck that had a gooseneck trailer on the back, and the gooseneck trailer peeled the side of my car off. And it's a wonder that it didn't take half my body with it, because the force of things should have pulled me into that wreck. And what was, I have to tell this part of the story too. What should have taken my left shoulder totally off didn't touch me. The only mark that I had on my body on that side, besides the glass all over my face, was I had this really weird spot on my shoulder, and the fabric was not touched. It was almost like this burn mark on my shoulder. And I always thought, I wonder if an angel actually reached over and pulled me out of the way. But I could have killed. I was literally working myself to death. I almost did that day, and almost took the life of another fella. But if he hadn't come over the hill at the exact time that he did, I would have been in his lane, and there was nowhere for he or either I to go. If he hadn't have been there, I'd have ended up in a ditch and hit one of the big pine trees there, and that would have been the end of my life. And so those kind of experiences have been typical of my dysfunction of overworking and trying to make sure that I was going to be a success, or what I was doing was going to be a success, rather than really doing it out of love for God and trusting Him. And that's hurt my relationship with my wife at times as well.
Yeah. So, well, what a miracle and a neat story and a lesson learned there.
Yep.
And Bill, boy, this has been a great time visiting with you and seeing you face to face again. And tell us how people can get a hold of you.
Well, we have a substantial website of resources that's the easiest way for people to access us. It's centerforfaithandwork.com, centerforfaithandwork.com. And there are over 100 articles, resources, curriculum pieces there for people that are interested in wisdom for their workplace. We do a podcast every week. We put something new up called Wednesday Wisdom. They can find that on their Wednesday Wisdom podcast. Once a month we do a webinar. And the last one, interestingly enough, Kathy did with me, and we talked about running the business of running the home, which was really great to have her on there. But there's a ton of resources there. There's a way to get in touch with me there as well through a link. And we'd love for people to go on, become part of that. We send out a newsletter digest every month that kind of outlines what new is on the website. It's not a big lengthy thing. It just says, okay, here are the new articles that we put up, and people can kind of look and see if they're interested in those.
Yeah, I've going to your website. It is a wealth of resources there that you've been building for 7 years. Man, you can really see there's been a lot of work put into the resources that are there. So, Bill, thank you. And it's been such a pleasure for you to be part of this show today, and we look forward to visiting with you again.
Bobby, it's always fun to be with you. And hey, thanks for your new book, Principal Profits. I've just always found your wisdom tremendously helpful and very, very just down to earth, practical, not complicated. Just really wise, and thanks for you. Thanks for all the your history in business and the wonderful things that you did with your company, and now are trying to help other people with as well.
Well, thank you very much for those kind comments. I'm just a simple man with a simple mind from Texas. So anyway, well, thank you very much.
Bobby, it's my pleasure, and that's the best kind, by the way.
Yeah.
All right.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.